Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about the chaotic state of British politics. And I want to talk a little bit about how we've got into this mess, and I have one or two suggestions of how things might be improved. I think we're in a state now where we have a clown, a worldwide laughingstock as a Prime Minister who seems to have immense power, and a carry-on team of utter second-rate incompetence as government. Now, I was minded to make this video on this subject, having watched Prime Minister's Question Time on Wednesday. Now, Prime Minister's Questions is a half an hour per week, where the idea is that various MPs and party leaders are able to ask the Prime Minister various questions. And previously, in previous administrations, the Prime Minister would generally answer honestly. Apparently, previous Prime Ministers have also said that they've always found it very stressful because they had to be very well prepared, very well briefed for whatever questions might come up. Now, under Boris Johnson, he has two devices to avoid answering questions. One is he just changes the subject and insults the opposition, and the second is that he just lies. We've seen so much evidence of him lying in Parliament, something which has never happened until this administration. And so he sees it, I think, like he sees most of life, and like he sees being Prime Minister, as a bit of a laugh. And you see he thoroughly enjoys it, and you see him in Parliament getting up and banding about all these insults, particularly against the opposition and against Keir Starmer, and at the same time you hear all the backbenchers are braying and shouting and making animal noises, behaving like naughty children. And you think, is this really how we want to be seen? Is this really how we want to be governed, with this sort of rabble in Parliament? This just chaos. It's just such a mess. And I got to thinking about Johnson, who is all-powerful, really, because he completely dominates his party. The only people who could ever get rid of him are his own backbenchers. Indeed, it looked a few weeks ago, before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that there was some sort of momentum towards a leadership election, which might well have unseated him. But of course, that's all gone now with with Ukraine. And so he's completely powerful, but there's such a big majority of 80, the opposition is as good as useless. They can't do anything. And I thought to myself, well, when you've got a Prime Minister who's so powerful, so dominant, if he's a good Prime Minister, he or she is a good Prime Minister and is doing good things and is competent, that's almost bearable. It's never good to have effectively a dictator running the show. But then I started to look at his record, and we're always being told by all these rather feeble government ministers that he's got the big decisions right, and he's doing such a wonderful job. He got the fastest booster rollout in the history of the world, and fastest growing economy in the G7, and he got Brexit done, and so on. And when you start to look at his record in a bit more detail, the COVID business, when that started, as a result of his dithering, we all know how he dithered each time there was a question of a lockdown and so on, as a result of which it is his claim that tens of thousands of people died unnecessarily. And we ended up with the highest number of deaths in Europe. That's not a great achievement. But that's all masked by the fact that he was fastest booster rollout, so we can forget all about the deaths. And when you look at PPE, for example, now we've never had corruption at the top of British government, not at anything like the extent we have right now. But now it seems to be almost acceptable that people were able to make fortunes, huge fortunes, almost overnight. People who'd never dealt with PPE before were able to make fortunes because they happened to know a minister who happened to put them through on the fast lane. And there are people driving around their Bentleys and they're buying expensive foreign properties, no doubt on the basis of all this money they made, simply because they knew a Conservative minister or somebody else senior in the Conservative Party. As I say, that's never happened before. Then you look at a test and trace, whereby £37,000 million was budgeted and given to the wife of a Tory MP to have a stab at setting up some sort of test and trace. She had a go at it. It didn't really work. She only spent half the money, apparently, which is nice. It didn't really work. I think most of the money was spent on consultants, incidentally, consultants who work for extremely rich accountancy firms. But anyway, it didn't really work. The Public Accounts Committee said it was a complete, practically ineffective. And that's all forgotten. But we're heading now for the most serious cost of living crisis, and £20,000 million would have gone a long way to alleviate a lot of people's suffering and struggles that are coming. But it's all gone. That's okay. That was under Boris Johnson. He decides everything. He's the boss. And he got Brexit done, didn't he? He got Brexit done. That's what they keep telling us. He got Brexit done. Well, look at Brexit. Look at the mess we're in. Look at our economy. 15% down. Exports to the EU down 15%. The OBR says that our economy has already shrunk by 4% as a direct result of Brexit. Many firms have gone to set up in the EU, having previously operated in the UK. Exporting to the EU and importing from the EU has become very difficult. We know we're going to have food shortages throughout Europe later in this year. Because of Brexit, a lot of people, a lot of foreign food producers are going to say, it's too much trouble sending food to the UK. I don't want my lorry full of tomatoes sat in Calais or Dover for a week. I can't afford that. And a lot of them are going to say, sod it, we're not going to export to the UK anymore. On top of that, also as a direct result of Brexit, many farmers who grew crops last year, who watched them rot in the fields and who ended up burning pigs because the abattoirs didn't have staff to deal with them, to process them. A lot of those farmers are not going to grow food this year. So I see us having a huge food crisis coming up, made so much worse because of Brexit. But he got Brexit done, didn't he? And then you look at the Northern Ireland Protocol. I mean, that's something that can't be solved. I mean, there's no solution to it. I mean, you can't have a border on the mainland. You can't have a border in the Irish Sea. Well, there has to be a border somewhere. And that looks as though it's going to drag on. It could end up in a resurrection of the Troubles. Who knows? It's just a complete utter mess. But he got Brexit done. He and Lord Gormless, who signed the agreement, did the agreement, which he immediately then decided was not a very good agreement and wanted to start changing it. They got Brexit done. Then there's Partygate, isn't there? We were told by him, very solemnly told, that we had to stay at home and we could only go out for exercise. And if we met somebody, we could only meet one other person. It had to be in an open space and all the rest of it. And what was he doing? Party after party, 14 parties in Downing Street. He went to one of them. He admits having gone to one of them, only one of them. He probably went to others, but he admits going to one of them where he didn't realise it was a party, where all these people had been invited to come along and bring a bottle and were all drinking. In the evening, thought it was a work meeting. And of course the report, the report which is being prepared at the moment by the Met, I think you can bet your bottom dollar that ain't going to come out until after the May elections. You've got to drag it out another 6 weeks, and then it won't affect the elections. And I think also there's this business of our response to the Ukrainian refugee crisis. We have been, or seem to be, so mean, so hostile, so reluctant to help in any way whatsoever. We had to be dragged to help at all. And this has been seen the whole world over. And then when you get, again, something which will have been seen the world over, when you get Johnson in a speech saying that the people in Ukraine who've been terrorised by Russian forces, by Putin, and where their cities have been flattened, where they've lost everything, where people, thousands and thousands of people have died, and yet they fought on so gallantly, so courageously, they fought on. He says their battle for freedom is similar to the battle we had to get out of the EU. They're comparable. And so when you look at all these things, you're not looking at a Prime Minister who's anyone to be very proud of. You're looking at a clown. And when the whole world can see what's going on, you get scenes like we saw last week when he was at the NATO meeting, where really nobody wanted to speak to him. Boris Billy No Mates Johnson. Nobody wants to talk to him. He's a clown. He doesn't want to be Prime Minister. He doesn't want to do the work of being a Prime Minister. He likes being famous. He likes being on the television. All the time he likes being on the television. But he doesn't want to do the work. And then you look at his cabinet. Now he's very dominant, completely dominant. If you wanted to stand as a Tory MP at the last election, you had to be pro-Brexit. So people who were pro-Brexit, okay, they stood, and anybody who had campaigned or believed that Brexit was a bad idea had to either stand down or they had to say, oh, I've changed my opinion, completely changed around, as half the cabinet did, completely changed my mind, now I'm pro-Brexit. I didn't think so before, but now I've suddenly seen the light, I'm pro-Brexit because I'm going to become a minister or whatever. And so a lot of the very good people who might have stood last time were unable to stand if they were principled because they believed that Brexit was a bad idea. So you end up with this sort of rabble that we've got at the moment, this carry-on team, and just looking at them. I mean, there's no one there. He's surrounded himself with weaklings. There's no one there who's going to challenge him. At one stage, until a short while ago, Rishi Sunak was seen as the heir apparent. It was thought that he might be the next to take over from Johnson. Well, he was very popular. He was very popular because he's fair, he keeps his head down and so on, keeps quiet, he keeps out of anything controversial, and because he'd given away a lot of money, hadn't he? He'd given all these bounce back loans to companies to get them through the pandemic. Nearly 5 billion of which had to be written off because it was given to people who had no intention of paying it back. And he gave out he arranged furlough and so on. So he's popular. He's been giving away money. Anybody giving away money is likely to be popular. But now suddenly, because of what happened last week, in a single day, he seems to have destroyed all his chances. He came up with a statement which was not very well received because it didn't seem to be doing enough for the poor and so on. And then the day afterwards, he was tetchy when he was interviewed on the radio. He had difficulty answering questions about how his wife's billionaire father was still operating in Russia, and there was that ridiculous photo thing where him putting petrol in a modest family car and having difficulty working out how a contactless credit card machine works and so on. And so I think he just in those few images, those few interviews, he really destroyed his reputation for quite a long time. He may get back eventually. But looking at the rest of the cabinet, I won't go through all of them, but just one or two of them. In the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, I mean, she was supposed to be a second favourite to become Prime Minister if Johnson were deposed. Well, really, really, have you ever seen such a sort of wishy-washy non-entity as Liz Truss? I think she's so aware of the fact that she's just a non-entity, that she's so desperate to promote herself that she has a Twitter account on which she puts, on average, I would say, 5 or 6 pictures of herself every day. You know, pictures of her with a little telephone and another picture of a minister somewhere, and she'll say at the bottom something trite like, "Oh, I had a very good conversation with the Foreign Minister of Burundi today, and where we talked about the possibility of future trade deals." And then you see a picture of her getting off a plane, and then another picture of her getting off another plane, and then a picture of her with a tall man, a picture with her with a short man, a picture with her with some flags, a picture with her on the telephone. I mean, she's the Foreign Secretary, for heaven's sake. What's she doing? Put all these pictures all over Twitter. What for? Because she wants to promote herself as a possible new leader. Heaven help us. Then there's the Prime Minister's Rottweiler, isn't there? The Home Secretary. A woman who is just filled with hate. Filled with hate above all for foreigners, and absolutely above all foreigners who want to come to this country. This is a woman who will do anything. She has set her whole career, her whole reputation on stopping immigrants coming here. We don't want any riffraff coming here. Brightest and best, that's okay. You've got a Nobel Prize, you can come here. But if you're riffraff, we don't want you. And we don't want those Ukrainians. Because, as she said herself, these are the words she used, these desperate women and children who've been welcomed all over Europe without paperwork, without visas and so on, they have to be thoroughly checked. They have to apply online. It's a 50-page form they have to complete, and they have to upload mortgage documents and utility bills and all the rest of it. They have to do all this in order to get a visa because, as she says, they could be terrorists and they could be Russian spies. And we can't have these women and children. These children, the Russians, they've got a lot of 4-year-old spies, the Russians. A lot of women and children are terrorists from Ukraine, being trained by the Russians secretly. And then she was appealing to the Irish government last week. She was saying, because obviously people realise it, they can go easily, these people from these desperate people from Ukraine, if they want to get into the UK, all they have to do is to go to Ireland, where they're welcomed with open arms, and all they've got to do then is go north and get a ferry from Belfast. She asked the Irish government to stop them coming because, this was the latest one, they could be drug smugglers. I mean, we've all seen the pictures. We've seen the pictures of these desperate people carrying a few heavy bags and a couple of children, perhaps holding one child, absolutely desperate, exhausted. They've lost everything. And she wants to keep them out because they could be drug smugglers. Truly, truly, I mean, I've said a lot about her before. Truly, truly awful. She's practically a psychopath. Dreadful woman. And then, at a time when we're just approaching this enormous cost of living crisis, where we're, 1,000 miles away from what could be the start of a world war, where things are really very, very worrying and dangerous, and where there are so many problems throughout the world, problems with energy and all sorts of problems, supply chains, etc., etc. One minister, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is looking at the possibility. In fact, he's set up a commission because you see, let me tell you about Rees-Mogg. He's somebody who, old Etonian, he's probably very knowledgeable about the classics or history or whatever he studied, but he's completely clueless. He's forever putting his foot in it by saying stupid things. And whilst for some reason or other Johnson wants him to remain a minister, he just gives him silly jobs. So before he was the leader of the House, which is just office manager. And now he's been given the job a month or so ago of being the minister looking for opportunities from Brexit. Now, we voted to leave the EU 6 years ago. And now he's been appointed to look for opportunities from Brexit. And what's he come up with? He's got a guy, or he was applying for someone, to look into the feasibility of reintroducing the Imperial measurement scheme. It's not nothing simple like 1,000 grams a kilogram, 1,000 kilograms a ton. No, none of that stuff. It's 16 ounces a pound, 14 pounds a stone, 20 stones a hundredweight, 112 pounds in a ton, but it's not the same as a European ton. It's a good British ton, which is slightly different. I mean, this system hasn't been used for 50 years. Why would you want to introduce some archaic system, which is complicated, it's difficult, it was always a nightmare. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when we used to have to do this in school. And what is the point of it? But this ridiculous joke of a man thinks that's a Brexit benefit that he should exploit and he should look into. And then look at the rest of the cabinet. Look at Oliver Dowd and look at Theresa Coffey, George Eustace, and Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary. It's like having Bernard Manning in charge of the Royal Ballet, isn't it? I mean, it's just so ridiculous. They're just such a second-rate lot. But it doesn't really matter because there's only one person who decides everything, and that is Boris Johnson. And as long as he doesn't upset his backbench, right-wing backbenchers, he's fine. He can do anything he likes with the country. And of course, a lot of the time he's doing whatever he can to make it more and more difficult for anyone to beat him in a forthcoming election. He's making it illegal he's made it illegal now to demonstrate, and whistleblowing is going to become a criminal offence, and voter ID is going to eliminate an awful lot of people who would more likely vote Labour than Conservative. So he's building himself this little dictatorship, and the rest of us are paying for it. So I started wondering why is it that we've got this dreadful government? How did it ever get elected? And I think it's something to do with the fact that previously people tended to vote. I'm talking about 20 years ago. People voted generally tribally. Half the country was Labour, half the country was Conservative approximately, and you always voted the same way as you had voted previously, the same way as your friends and your family. Everybody traditionally voted. But I think nowadays, with social media and with the news, constant news showing clips of little snippets of interviews with politicians, usually the more interesting clips, people who are generally not very interested in politics are attracted by these little clips, by this social media and so on. And so they tend to vote on trivial things such as liking somebody. I mean, how many times have you seen people interviewed and they say about Boris Johnson, he's done this wrong, that wrong, and the other wrong. And they say, oh, yes, I know, but that's just Boris. I like him. He's funny. I liked him when he was on Have I Got News for You. I thought he was really good. No, I like that other one. No, what's he called? That one, Starmer, that's the one. Yes, no, he's a bit dull. I wouldn't vote for him. He's very dull. And that's the sort of level on which a lot of people vote. And so in order to win elections these days, you've got to be good on marketing, you've got to be good on advertising. That's what it is. You're selling with slogans. And that's why Take Back Control was so powerful, amazingly powerful, because people thought, oh, we've lost control. Somebody else is telling us what to do. Didn't bother to investigate and didn't bother to find out that it was complete and utter nonsense. And likewise, when you get a character like Boris Johnson, and nobody knows what he stands for, really, nobody knows, and he was fortunate he was up against Corbyn, who a lot of people disliked, and many people thought was, could not possibly be a prime minister. So you get this voting for personalities as well, and that's why you end up in the situation we are now, where you've got a clown running the show. So what's to be done about it? Because things are getting worse, they're not getting any better. There are two things, really, which I'm going to suggest. And the first is very obviously proportional representation. I'm a floating voter. I'm neither left nor right. A lot of people on here accuse me of being a socialist, and others even of being a Tory supporter. I voted for all three parties over the years. I generally very often vote against somebody as much as voting for somebody. I live in a constituency like millions and millions of others throughout this country, which is a safe constituency. Whoever I vote for, I know who's going to be the MP after the next election. It'll be the same from the same party as it's always been in this constituency. As I say, millions of people are like that. So my vote is a complete waste of time. I could stay home. And this is ridiculous. I mean, we are the only country, apart from Poland, the only country in the whole of Europe that still has a first-past-the-post system. The Tories want to keep it because, of course, they benefit from it. And as far as I can see, the Labour Party seem pretty keen on keeping it as well. I'm not quite sure why that should be. But it's a ridiculous system. I mean, it makes absolute sense to have proportional representation where everybody is represented and fairly represented. But there is something else that I did want to talk about, which affects politics, I think, and that is this. I want to tell you about a company in America. It's called BlackRock. It's a company many people will know of, many people won't have heard of, but it's a company which is they're investment managers. That people give them their money and they invest it. And if they do well, then obviously, like any other investment company, people give them more money. And this company, which was set up in 1988, 1989 by a guy called Larry Fink, and he's still the CEO. This company is managing $10 trillion. Now, the entire GDP of the UK is about $2.5 trillion. So this one company in America is investing on behalf of investors, investing the equivalent of 4 times what we produce in goods and services throughout the UK in a whole year. So it is a staggeringly big company, huge company. Now it's run by a board of directors, and obviously they've got thousands and thousands and thousands of employees. But the reason they've been so successful, as they happily claim, is that right from the start, they use supercomputers. In other words, instead of human judgment, they've concentrated on building these computers where the computers are able to access billions and billions of pieces of information constantly, all the time, and whereby they've built and developed algorithms which will eliminate risk or minimize risk and so on, and they're able to make these fantastically complicated calculations that human beings could never make. And so every decision to invest that they make is based on what a computer has calculated as being a reasonable investment. And it's been successful because, we have to admit it, I mean, computers are cleverer than we are, much cleverer. Now I started thinking, supposing, because it's not, I mean, there are obviously obvious differences, but it's running a country, running a huge company of that size, 4 times the size of this country. There are similarities. And I thought to myself, supposing the British government were sent to take over managing BlackRock, you might have the front bench of the government and then the opposite front bench. And so they'd arrive. The first thing they would do would be to switch off the computer because, and this is something which you're probably aware of, politicians know everything. You never ever ask a politician a question and them say, I'm sorry, I don't know, I can't answer that, or I have to find out. They know the answer to everything, and they know it absolutely definitely. And it's usually something that the party headquarters has told them. So anyway, they switch off the computer and then they start rowing across the table. They're arguing. And some people want to invest in this and some people want to invest in something else. Some people would want to invest because somebody had told them something might be a good idea. And somebody else would be worried about upsetting somebody who might not support them next time, and the next time they come up for re-election to the board. Some of them might have friends, for example, who are maybe Russians who give them some money to help them. So they want to vote sort of not to upset them. And they'd all argue about it across the table. And then later on, at the end of this, the CEO would walk in. Now, he would have been at a factory somewhere, because he does this 2 or 3 days a week. He'd have been at a factory having his photograph taken in high-vis uniforms and things. And, he doesn't really like being in the office. He doesn't like running things. He likes being on the television. And he would come in and he'd sit down, and then he would completely ignore all discussions that had taken place previously. And he would say, this is what I'm going to invest in. If you got it right, that'll be fine. If you got it wrong, it's just Boris. It just would be absolute chaotic. BlackRock wouldn't last 5 minutes. And I thought, what would happen if the other way around? Supposing BlackRock, the board of BlackRock came and took over the British government. What would they do? First thing they do, they put supercomputers in every government department. They'd probably have a massive central one as well. And those computers would be programmed to gather information whereby they would make decisions or offer advice based on millions and millions and millions of factors, all carefully weighed. And instead of making decisions whereby, for example, the government gives a bit of money for a road project here because it's in a Tory marginal, or decides to build a hospital there because, although it's not a priority, but it will favour them, and whereby different decisions are made in order to favour maybe backers. Decisions will be made inanimmately by a computer based on huge mass of information. Now, you couldn't hand over the entire government to computers, but an awful lot of it could be transferred to computers. And I think probably this is going to happen. I think eventually it will be happening, because I think people will realise that the Parliament we have now is a complete waste of time. People go into Parliament and they debate, and nobody takes any notice of the debates because Boris Johnson is going to decide what the law is going to be. Complete waste of time. They have a few committees where they make recommendations and so on and produce reports. The only thing that MPs do of any value is constituency work, where they're helping constituents. If everything was gradually transferred to IT, AI, these MPs could all go and work in the constituencies, do something worthwhile, spend more time there sorting out parking spaces and people being overcharged on their rates or whatever they wanted to to complain about. But the main business of government, which is at the moment being controlled by one man, will be controlled by artificial intelligence, which is so much cleverer and more efficient than any human beings could ever be, any group of human beings could ever be. And when you think of how much of our lives has been handed over to automation and IT and AI over the years, you think about banking and about travel and about booking hotels and about how supermarkets work and how everything is so automated, and computers very, very seldom go wrong. If they go wrong, it's because they've been programmed wrongly. They don't go wrong. And so people are then free to go off and do other things because a superior intelligence is running things. Now, I know a lot of people disagree with me about this, and there'll be lots of reasons put forward as why handing over much of our government to automation is not a good idea. But as I say, I think it will happen eventually, inevitably. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. If you've watched this far, thank you very much indeed. And if you haven't already subscribed, I'd appreciate it if you would. And if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be also much appreciated. And so until next time, bye for now.